Imagine losing your child at a crowded zoo. You turn your back for just a few seconds, and when you look again, he's gone. No sound, no trace, just silence. Now imagine, 12 years later, you're sitting alone at home, watching a wildlife documentary, and you see him, older, taller, walking beside a baby elephant on the other side of the world. This is Rachel and Ethan's story. But the truth behind what happened during those 12 missing years is more unbelievable than anyone could have imagined. But before we begin, tell me, where in the world are you watching from? The late morning sun filtered softly through the canopy of towering palms at the San Diego Zoo. Shadows danced gently on the brick paths as a mix of excited voices, distant animal calls, and stroller wheels over stone filled the warm spring air. The scent of sunscreen, popcorn, and blooming hibiscus floated through the space. It was April 18th, 2011, a Monday, just after Tidyam, and the zoo was already buzzing with school groups, tourists, and families enjoying the beginning of spring break. Rachel Miller held her son Ethan's small hand tightly as they moved through the crowd. He was 6 years old and impossibly curious, the kind of child who asked why the flamingos were pink, how high giraffes could see, and whether elephants cried when they were sad. He had just lost his front 2 baby teeth, and when he smiled, it made her heart ache with something like pride and fear at once. Ethan wore his favorite shirt that day, the one with a cartoon elephant balancing on a blue circus ball, and a red baseball cap with his name stitched across the back. "Can we see the snakes now?" he asked, tugging her hand. "In a minute, love," Rachel replied. "Let's find your dad first." They had split up briefly. Ethan had needed a bathroom break, and Eric, Rachel's husband, had gone ahead to get drinks. They were supposed to meet at the reptile house. Rachel scanned the surrounding area. Parents, kids, balloons, cameras. No sign of Eric yet. She guided Ethan toward a shaded bench near a bronze tiger sculpture and told him to sit for a minute. "You stay right here," she said, kneeling in front of him. "I'll be just there at the water fountain, okay?" Ethan nodded. She walked no more than 10 steps away, kept him in her peripheral vision the entire time. Or thought she did. She filled a paper cup, took a sip, and turned back. The bench was empty. At first her stomach didn't drop. She simply assumed he had stood up. Kids did that. He probably wanted to get a closer look at the sculpture, but he wasn't near the tiger. She walked quickly toward the bench, calling his name. "Ethan! Baby, where are you?" No answer. Still calm, still rational. He must have walked a few steps toward the reptile house, thinking they were leaving. She moved faster now, weaving through the throng of zoo visitors, repeating his name louder with each step. The sun suddenly felt too hot, the sound of laughter too loud. By the time she reached the entrance of the reptile exhibit, panic had taken root. "Ethan!" A woman pushing a stroller turned toward her. "Are you okay?" "My son," Rachel said, voice shaking. He was just here. He's 6, red cap, elephant shirt." The woman's expression changed instantly. "I didn't see him, but I'll help look." Within minutes, strangers began calling his name. Within 20, zoo security had been alerted. Within 30, police were on the grounds. And by noon, the entire zoo had been placed under a soft lockdown. The San Diego Zoo is a massive, sprawling complex, over 100 acres of winding paths, dense foliage, bridges, artificial streams, and enclosed animal habitats. It was a paradise for any child. It was a nightmare for any parent who'd lost one. Detective Marcus Hale arrived just after 1 p.m., called in from his lunch break by a dispatcher who said, "You might want to take this one personally." It was only when he saw the name Rachel Miller that he understood. His sister had once worked with Rachel. They'd gone to the same church years ago. He'd even seen photos of Ethan on Facebook. A sweet kid. Loved animals. Bright smile. The day blurred into a chaos of heat, searching, barking canines, helicopters, and hushed radio static. Rachel's voice became hoarse from screaming his name. Eric nearly punched a zoo staff member in frustration. Volunteers fanned out across the enclosures. No one saw Ethan leave the bench. No one saw anyone take him. No cameras caught anything unusual. His image was broadcast across local news by 5 p.m., and by 8 it was national. Last seen wearing a red cap and a shirt with a cartoon elephant. That night Rachel couldn't sleep. She sat in Ethan's room, still smelling faintly of sunscreen and the zoo. His sheets were rumpled. His shoes were still by the door. A half-colored drawing of an elephant was clipped to his artboard. She picked it up. A blue elephant. Big and gentle-looking, with a crooked smile. Ethan had insisted they use blue instead of gray. "Because blue elephants are happy, Mommy." Rachel wept into the paper until it tore. The days turned to weeks. Searches were expanded. Witnesses were re-interviewed. Flyers were taped to telephone poles, park fences, and shop windows. Rachel appeared on television begging for any information. She barely recognized her own face, drawn, pale, lined with exhaustion and dread. Eric stopped speaking much. Detective Hale did what he could. He interviewed every zoo employee, scanned every second of security footage. He went through the trash cans on the grounds himself. Nothing. It was like Ethan had dissolved into thin air, but someone must have seen something. Someone always did. A gardener named Luis Morales said he saw a man in a green staff jacket walking near the reptile house that morning, holding a child by the wrist. He assumed it was a zookeeper with a tour group. But now, he told Hale, maybe I remember the kid struggling, not a lot, just enough to notice. The problem? The zoo didn't issue green jackets. That thread led nowhere. No fingerprints, no suspect, no confirmed sightings. By summer, the case was ice cold. 12 years later. Rachel Miller sat alone in her apartment in Santa Rosa, Northern California, nursing a glass of red wine and watching a nature documentary on PBS. The years had not been kind. She'd lost her marriage, her job, and most of her friends. She now worked remotely for a nonprofit and rarely left her house. The documentary was about wildlife rescue in eastern Africa, elephants and rhinos mostly, something about rehabilitation and reintroduction into the wild. She wasn't even really watching, just letting the narration wash over her. Until a close-up appeared of a young man, tall, lean, with sun-darkened skin and messy black hair, guiding a baby elephant through a muddy trail. His hands were gently placed on its side. His face turned slightly toward the camera as he smiled. Rachel's breath caught in her throat. She sat forward. The wine glass slipped from her hand and shattered on the floor. She froze the frame, got up, moved closer to the screen. The boy's face, his smile. The faint shadow of a scar near the base of his neck. "No," she whispered, "that's not possible." She snapped a photo of the screen with her phone. Her hands were shaking so violently she had to try twice. Then she rushed to the box under her bed, the one labeled Ethan. Inside were photos, drawings, old-school papers, and one in particular, Ethan, age 6, standing in their backyard, shirtless after running through the sprinklers. The scar, the exact same location, the same shape. Oh my God! Her heart was pounding. She could barely breathe. She watched the rest of the documentary. The boy's name wasn't given. He wasn't interviewed. He was just there, helping, moving through the background, but it was him. She was sure of it. She sent the frame to Marcus Hale, now retired, with a simple message. "Tell me I'm not crazy." He replied 5 minutes later. "I see it too." Rachel sat back in her chair, hands gripping the armrests. On the screen, the young man, the one who looked exactly like her son, disappeared into the trees behind the elephant. And just before the scene cut to black, Rachel noticed something else. Around the boy's neck, swinging gently as he walked, was a small worn cord. At the end of it, a charm, a blue elephant. Ethan Miller was born on a windy morning in March of 2005 in a modest hospital in San Diego. He didn't cry immediately. The nurses held their breath. His mother gripped the bed rails with white-knuckled fists, whispering, "Please, please, please." And then he let out a sound that would become so familiar to her over the years, a short, surprised gasp, followed by a high-pitched squeal that echoed across the delivery room like laughter. That was Ethan. Even in birth, he took his time, but when he arrived, he made sure everyone noticed. As a toddler, he was fearless. By 3, he had climbed out of his crib, explored the backyard barefoot, and tried to feed a squirrel half a pancake. At 4, he broke his collarbone jumping off the couch with a makeshift cape made from a dish towel. When they rushed him to the ER, he didn't cry. He just looked up at the doctor and said, "I was trying to fly." Rachel and Eric often joked that Ethan wasn't just curious, he was investigative. He wanted to know how everything worked, how things moved, what sounds animals made, why they made them. His questions never ended, and when he couldn't find answers, he drew them. Hundreds of little sketches littered the house: dolphins with wings, lions wearing glasses, a bear holding a cup of coffee. He had a particular fascination with elephants. Rachel never quite understood why. Maybe because they were huge and gentle, like Ethan's heart. Or maybe because one day they read a book together about elephants never forgetting, and that idea stuck with him. "I want to be like that," he had told her. "I don't want to forget anything." Their house in San Diego was small but warm. A narrow hallway led to Ethan's room, which he'd filled with plastic animal figures and hand-drawn maps of pretend jungles. On one wall, Rachel had painted a mural of the savannah, baobab trees, clouds, and a family of elephants in silhouette. Ethan had added his own touch, a small blue elephant at the corner of the wall, peeking from behind a bush. "His name is Gamba," Ethan explained. "He's the brave one." Rachel never painted over it. Eric worked long hours as a supply chain manager for a local grocery chain. He was devoted but exhausted. Rachel, a former kindergarten teacher, had left work to raise Ethan full-time. The plan was for her to return to teaching when he turned 7. She never did. Ethan's 6th birthday was a quiet affair. He invited 3 friends from the neighborhood. They had cupcakes, a water balloon fight, and a backyard scavenger hunt. Rachel had hidden clues in toy eggs, and Ethan had cracked each one with a triumphant grin. One clue read, "Where the sunflowers touch the sky, a secret waits beneath the eye." Ethan had giggled as he dug through the flowerbed to find a toy compass buried in the dirt. Afterward, he sat on the porch swing with Rachel, his jeans muddy, his cheeks flushed, a smudge of frosting on his nose. "Mommy," he asked, "what happens if someone gets lost forever?" She paused. "Do you mean like in the woods?" "No," he said, swinging his legs, "like gone. Gone where people don't look." Rachel looked at him, startled by the question. "Why do you ask that?" Ethan shrugged. "I don't know. I had a dream last night. I was in a place with animals, but it wasn't here. And I didn't know where you were. I yelled, but my voice didn't work." She pulled him close. "Well, that's just a dream. You're never going to be lost, okay? I'll always find you." He looked up at her, serious. "What if I forget who I am?" Rachel swallowed hard. "You won't." But the question lingered. The week before the zoo trip, Rachel bought Ethan new sneakers. Red ones? He'd worn through the soles of his old pair chasing squirrels at the park. The new ones had Velcro straps and little white stripes on the side. He wore them to bed the first night. "Why do you love the zoo so much?" she had asked, brushing his hair from his forehead. He stared at the ceiling. "Because animals are like us, but they can't talk. So you have to really watch them to know what they're saying." The morning of April 18th, Ethan had been more excited than usual. He woke up early, dressed himself in the elephant shirt without being asked, and packed a small backpack with snacks, a bottle of water, and a folded piece of paper. Rachel noticed it as she zipped the bag. "What's this?" he shrugged. "Just a picture." Later, after the disappearance, when she emptied his backpack at the police station, the drawing was gone. No one ever found it. Detective Marcus Hale interviewed Rachel and Eric separately the night of the disappearance. "Tell me everything about Ethan," Hale said, sitting across from Rachel in a sterile conference room at the zoo's administrative building. "Every detail, even the ones that don't feel important." Rachel had cried until there were no tears left. Now, she just stared. "He's gentle," she said. "He's got this old soul. He watches more than he talks. He listens. He always notices when someone's sad." She paused. "And he's scared of loud noises. Fireworks, sirens." Hale took notes. "Any chance he'd wander off on his own?" "No," she said firmly. "Never. He waits for me, always." The next day, Hale visited Ethan's room. It was still intact. He walked slowly, carefully, noting everything: the mural, the plastic animals, the row of books, a photo on the nightstand of Rachel and Ethan at the beach. He was laughing, holding up a tiny crab in his hand, and taped to the closet door, a list in crayon. "Things I want to see one day: a real blue elephant, the biggest tree in the world's snow, a zebra that talks Africa dinosaurs, if possible." Hale read it twice. Months later, when the media interest faded and the flyers were yellowed and curling at the edges, Rachel sat alone in Ethan's room again. She picked up the plastic elephant from the windowsill, the one he used to carry in his pocket, and then she remembered something. The week before he vanished, Ethan had told her about a man at the park who gave him peanuts to feed the birds. She had assumed it was just a friendly stranger, but now she wasn't sure. "Did he have a uniform?" she'd asked back then. "I think so," Ethan had replied, "like a jacket." "What color?" "Green." No one knew it yet, but that detail, the green jacket, would echo back years later like a shadow hiding in plain sight. In Kenya, 12 years later, the young man in the documentary went by a different name: Ben. He didn't speak English. He had no memory of the United States. But sometimes, when the sky turned orange at dusk and the elephants trumpeted low from the trees, he would dream of a swing, a painted wall, and the smell of chocolate cupcakes. He never told anyone, because he didn't know those weren't just dreams. He thought they were wishes. That same night, after Rachel froze the frame of the documentary, she sat down on the floor, trembling, holding the old crayon list in her hands. She looked at item Piafoyu again. Africa. And for the first time in 12 years, she didn't just hope. She believed. Rachel didn't sleep that night. She stayed up combing the internet for any trace of the documentary she had seen. The program had aired as part of a wildlife series on PBS called Voices of the Wild. But no episode guide listed the specific footage she'd seen. She tried rewinding the cable stream, searching YouTube, messaging in Facebook groups for elephant lovers, even emailing the local PBS station. No answers. At 3:47 a.m., she finally found it, a brief, unofficial upload from a user called Wildlight Doc Fan, who had captured a portion of the episode on their phone. It was low quality and shaky, but the scene was there. The boy, the baby elephant, the worn necklace. She paused the video, zoomed in. The resolution distorted the image, but there was no denying the silhouette of the pendant, a tiny, faded blue elephant. Her hand flew to her mouth. She wasn't imagining things. By morning, Rachel had called Marcus Hale. He answered on the third ring. "You look like hell," he said when she picked up their video call. "Worse than usual." "I didn't sleep." "Neither did I." She turned the camera toward the TV screen. "Did you find anything?" He nodded slowly. I called a guy I used to work with, FBI Cyber Unit. We pulled metadata from the original PBS footage. It was filmed by an independent wildlife cinematographer. Her name's Olivia Reed. Rachel's breath caught. Can you find her? She's based out of Portland, already reached out. She agreed to talk. When? Tomorrow. The next day, Rachel and Hale boarded a morning flight to Portland. The two hadn't seen each other in nearly a decade. Hale looked older, heavier in the shoulders, tired around the eyes. Rachel had aged too, but it wasn't just time. It was the kind of aging that comes from prolonged grief. Brittle, haunted. They didn't speak much on the plane. Both stared out the window, thinking about elephants. Olivia Reed's studio was inside a repurposed warehouse filled with light, plants, and stacks of film equipment. She welcomed them with the gentle presence of someone who'd spent too many years observing silence in nature. Rachel showed her the frozen frame from her phone. Olivia blinked. You know him? I think I do. Olivia walked to a shelf and pulled out a hard drive. He was a local volunteer, she said. He showed up one day at a wildlife reserve near the border of Kenya and Tanzania. No official record. He called himself Ben. Said he'd been living with a family from a nearby village since he was 6 or 7. Rachel froze. Did he say where he came from? Olivia shook her head. He didn't know. He said he remembered water, a boat, then noise, then animals. Rachel clutched her arms. He has a scar, she said quietly. On his neck. Yes, Olivia said. He never talked about it. Hale leaned forward. Do you have more footage of him? Olivia nodded. Ours? I'll send them to you. Rachel hesitated. Do you remember anything else about him? Anything unusual? Olivia paused. He didn't speak English, not even a little, but he could calm animals like I've never seen before, especially elephants. They followed him like he was one of their own. Back in California, Rachel watched every frame Olivia had sent. Most of it was quiet, uneventful. Long days in the bush, elephants grazing the rustle of grass. But Ben appeared often, sometimes feeding the calves, sometimes leading them through thick brush. And then something strange. In one clip, Ben knelt beside a calf, lying in a shallow creek. The elephant was covered in mud and struggling to breathe. Another volunteer shouted for help, but Ben didn't move. He leaned close, whispered something in its ear, and began stroking its trunk in a circular motion. The elephant's breathing slowed. Its eyes closed. The camera zoomed slightly. Around Ben's wrist was a band of woven leather. Hale paused the video. Zoom in there. Rachel leaned forward. That's handmade. Zoom more. There, faintly burned into the leather, were 2 letters, E-M. The next lead came from the village itself, a rural community called Nyaruba, where Daniel Uma, the man who had taken Ben in, still lived. Hale arranged a translator and set up a video call. Daniel was warm, thoughtful. When shown the image of Ethan, age 6, he nodded slowly. Yes, he said. That's the boy, but he didn't know his name. We called him Ben because he had a bruise on his arm in the shape of a bee. We thought it meant something. Rachel's voice trembled. Do you remember how he arrived? Yes, Daniel said. He was found by a ranger, walking near the river, alone, no shoes, dirty. He couldn't speak, wouldn't let anyone touch him. The ranger thought he might have been with poachers or maybe traffickers, but no one ever came looking. Did he ever mention a zoo? Rachel asked. Daniel paused. He used to draw pictures of animals, cages, people behind glass. Rachel blinked back tears. Did he ever say the word San Diego? No. But sometimes, he said, Sandy, over and over, like a name. That night, Rachel dreamt of a child calling from inside a mirrored box, hands pressed against the glass, screaming silently while a crowd passed by. She woke up with the taste of salt in her mouth. Hale dug deeper. He pulled up records from the San Diego Zoo, employees, security logs, maintenance workers from 2011. One name surfaced more than once. Wesley Trent, a subcontracted refrigeration technician who had worked maintenance routes near the reptile house. His last logged shift was the day Ethan vanished. Trent had never been interviewed. He had died 6 months later in a private plane crash while traveling across Africa. The crash site? Near northern Tanzania. Hale stared at the screen. "You've got to be kidding me." Rachel found Ethan's old backpack in the attic. She hadn't looked at it in years. Inside was a small, unused sketchbook, one she'd never noticed before. Most of the pages were blank, except one. A drawing of an elephant, blue, surrounded by trees. Behind it, a tall fence. And a man. His face was shadowed, but he wore a jacket. Green. Hale contacted the FBI. With Olivia's footage, the drawing, and the metadata, they agreed to reopen the case, quietly. But Rachel didn't want quiet. She wanted to find her son. So she did the unthinkable. She contacted a national investigative news show, The Moment, hosted by a journalist named Lynn Sawyer. Known for breaking cold cases on live TV, they agreed to meet. Lynn listened without interruption. Her eyes widened when Rachel showed her the video frame. "This, if true, would be the most incredible story we've ever aired," she said. "I don't care about ratings," Rachel replied. "I want my son to know he was never forgotten." Lynn hesitated. "If we air this, we need confirmation." Rachel nodded. "Then find it." 2 weeks later, Rachel opened an email. Subject, "Footage recovered. Please watch." She clicked the link. It was a drone clip from the original documentary, unused footage. In it, Ben knelt in the grass, brushing a young elephant's side. The wind lifted his shirt slightly, revealing his lower back. There, barely visible in the golden light, was a faded tattoo. Just 3 letters. SDZ San Diego Zoo. The day Rachel received permission to travel to Kenya, she didn't cry. She simply folded the email, printed it out, and placed it beside the worn blue elephant charm that she now kept on her nightstand. The U.S. Embassy had approved her humanitarian travel request under extraordinary family circumstances, supported by the reopened FBI case file and the footage provided by Olivia Reed. Marcus Hale would join her as a consultant. She booked her flight for the following week. Before leaving, Rachel met with Lynn Sawyer from The Moment once more. Lynn laid out her plan. "We go with you. We film everything. But we keep it off the air until you give the green light." Rachel nodded. "I want this story told, but not until he knows who he is." The journey to Nyaruba took 3 days. After landing in Nairobi, Rachel and Hale traveled by charter plane to a regional outpost, then drove hours through dusty roads into the bush. Each mile stretched like a lifetime. The world changed outside her window. Buildings gave way to savanna, highways to dirt paths, noise to silence. They reached the village near sundown. Daniel Uma greeted them at the compound gate. "He's still here," he said quietly, his voice lined with uncertainty. "But he doesn't know you." Rachel's hands trembled. "Can I see him?" Daniel paused. "Not yet." That night, Rachel sat under a thatched roof, listening to distant animal calls and staring into a fire. She held a photograph of Ethan, age 6, smile wide, missing teeth. She whispered to the flames, "You're alive." Hale sat beside her, quiet. "He might not want to be found," he said finally. "I don't care," she replied. "He was taken." The next day, they watched from a distance as Ben, tall, calm, barefoot, guided a young elephant calf through the undergrowth. His hands moved in slow, fluid patterns. The elephant followed like a shadow. He looked nothing like the 6-year-old boy who vanished, but the scar was there. So was the presence. Rachel's heart pounded in her chest. She reached for the camera crew's monitor, zoomed in. A child once lost was now a man who didn't know he'd been missing. With Daniel's help, they arranged a meeting. They told Ben that American researchers wanted to interview him for a documentary about elephant empathy. He agreed, reluctantly. Rachel waited behind the camera. Lynn began gently. "Ben, how did you come to live here?" Ben paused, looking into the trees. "I was found," he said in Swahili. "I don't remember anything before that." "No memories at all?" "Only sounds. A loud place, a big cage, a hand." Lynn leaned in. "Do you remember a woman?" Ben hesitated. "Sometimes. I dream of someone calling my name. But it's not this name. It's softer." He looked down at the charm around his neck. "Like this." Lynn showed him a laminated photo, Ethan in his elephant shirt. Ben blinked. "That's not me," he said. But his voice cracked. Later that night, Rachel walked alone to the sanctuary edge. Ben was sitting on a rock staring at the horizon. She approached slowly. He turned as she stepped into the light. Their eyes locked. Neither spoke for several seconds. "I know this is strange," Rachel said, her voice breaking, "but I think you're my son." Ben stood up. "I'm sorry," he said, backing away. "You're mistaken." She held out the sketchbook from his childhood. Inside was the drawing of the blue elephant. He glanced at it, his breath caught, his hands clenched. "I've seen this before," he whispered, "because you drew it." "No," he said, "in a dream." Hale requested DNA testing. Ben agreed reluctantly. The samples were sent to a lab in Nairobi, expedited under special authorization. Results would take 72 hours. During the wait, Rachel stayed nearby, not intruding, just observing. Sometimes she'd leave little objects from Ethan's childhood on a bench, a red cap, a toy elephant, the sketchbook. Ben never said anything, but one day she noticed the hat was gone. Later, she saw him wearing it, backwards, just like Ethan used to. On the second day, Ben approached Daniel. "Do you believe what they say?" he asked. Daniel sighed. "I believe you've always had a piece of you missing." Ben looked down at his hands. "I don't want to lose this life." Daniel nodded. "But maybe you already lost another." On the third night, Ben couldn't sleep. He walked through the sanctuary alone, past the sleeping calves and the stables. The moon lit the path faintly. He stopped near the water trough and stared into the reflection. Then he reached under his shirt and pulled out the leather bracelet, turned it over. E.M. He didn't know what the letters meant. But he wanted to. At sunrise, the lab results arrived. Marcus Hale opened the envelope. He didn't say anything at first. He just turned to Rachel, handed her the page, and stepped back. At the top, in bold letters, DNA match found. 99.87% maternal confirmation. Rachel didn't cry when the DNA test confirmed it. She had run out of tears years ago. Instead, she sat still, her breath caught between disbelief and overwhelming relief. Ethan, her Ethan, was alive. He had always been alive. He had grown into a man in a different world, under a different name, with a different life. And he didn't remember her. Not fully, not yet. Ben sat across from her that morning, quiet, his fingers tracing the edge of the paper with the test results. "I don't understand," he said softly. Rachel studied him. The face she had searched for in crowds, in airports, in dreams, older sun-kissed, unfamiliar in expression, but the eyes, those were Ethan's. "You were taken," she said gently. "From the zoo. You didn't run. You didn't wander. Someone took you." He blinked. Why would someone take a child? That was the question that had tortured her for 12 years. Marcus Hale stepped in. "We've been digging," he said, "and we found something, or rather, someone." He placed a folder on the table. Inside, a photo of Wesley Trent, the refrigeration contractor who had worked near the reptile house on the day Ethan disappeared. His name came up early in the investigation, Hale explained, but we missed the connection. He wasn't an official zoo employee, so background checks weren't run thoroughly. He had international travel records tied to wildlife export companies, and a criminal record sealed in Texas, smuggling violations. Rachel clenched her jaw. He died in a plane crash. Yes, 6 months after Ethan disappeared in Tanzania, the same region where Ben was found. Ben swallowed. He took me? We believe so, Hale said. And we believe you saw something you shouldn't have. It began to make sense. Trent had likely been involved in illegal animal trafficking. On the day of Ethan's disappearance, a shipment of rare reptiles was logged as delayed due to mechanical error. No one questioned it. Ethan had likely wandered near an enclosure and witnessed something. Maybe animals being removed, crates being tampered with. Trent, panicking, had grabbed him. Perhaps he thought it would be temporary. But the more Ethan remembered, the more dangerous it became. And then, a private flight out of the country, a crash. Everyone presumed dead, but Ethan had survived. I don't remember any of that, Ben said, his voice breaking. You were found weeks later, Hale said, alone, disoriented, likely concussed. Possibly drugged, no ID, no language. Rachel added, You had that scar on your neck before, but the ones on your back, the ones that look newer, they're not from your childhood. Ben looked away. I've always had dreams, he whispered. Cages. A plane. Fire. I didn't know if they were real. The emotional weight hit like a tidal wave. Rachel showed him pictures from his childhood, his drawing of Gamba the elephant, the list of things he wanted to see. She pulled out his old red sneakers, now too small to fit a doll, and the tiny compass from his 6th birthday scavenger hunt. Ben stared at the compass. I remember this, he said. Rachel reached out. He didn't pull away. That night, Ben didn't sleep. He walked the perimeter of the sanctuary, the stars above him sharp and endless. He felt like he was standing between two lives, one he had built, one he had lost, and now both were demanding to be claimed. The next morning, a local elder named Ayo approached Ben. She had known him since he was first brought to the village. She had been the one to braid his leather bracelet, the one marked E.M. Ethan Miller, though she never knew that at the time. She sat beside him in silence, then handed him something wrapped in cloth. It was a necklace, made from an old button smoothed by time. Ben frowned. You gave me this before, he said. She nodded. You used to cry at night, Ayo said gently. You would whisper a name. I never understood it. Something like Rachel. And once you said something else. What? He didn't mean to crash. Ben looked up sharply. You remembered that, Ayo said, long before you had words. Back in San Diego, Hale requested access to the black box data of the plane crash that killed Trent. It had been logged as pilot error, but buried deep in the report was an overlooked note. Unidentified child-size footprint located near wreckage. The local authorities had never followed up. Ethan hadn't been on the passenger manifest because he wasn't supposed to be there. Lynn Sawyer pushed to move the story forward. With Rachel's blessing, she aired the special 2-part episode of The Moment titled Vanished at the Zoo, The Ethan Miller Discovery. It went viral overnight. Comments flooded in. How did no one notice this? 12 years gone, and he was right there. That elephant charm broke me. I hope he comes home. But Ben wasn't sure. He stood with Rachel near the airstrip a week later, their bags packed. She had delayed her return, but now the flight back to the U.S. was scheduled. I can't force you, she said, but I want you to come. Not just for me, for you. Ben looked down at his hands. I don't know who I am. You're Ethan, she said, but you're also Ben, and maybe that's okay. He hesitated, then turned. "I need more time." That night, as the plane lifted into the sky without him, Ben sat alone in the sanctuary, but beside him was something new. The compass, pointing home, and the blue elephant charm, now tied to his wrist. 3 months passed before Ben stepped foot on American soil. He arrived quietly, without media attention, through a side gate at LAX, escorted by embassy officials. Rachel stood waiting, her hands trembling. When he emerged from customs, carrying only a backpack and the blue elephant charm on his wrist, she nearly collapsed. They didn't speak at first. She simply opened her arms, and this time he didn't hesitate. Rachel's house hadn't changed much in 12 years. She had moved once, downsized, but kept a room ready. She had never stopped believing. The walls were lined with framed photos, newspaper clippings, childhood drawings. Ethan's baby blanket still sat folded on the bed. Ben stood in the doorway of the room she called his. "It's like a museum," he said softly. Rachel smiled sadly. "It was the only way I remembered what home felt like." They spent the first few days in silence, interrupted only by shared meals, short walks, and the occasional question. "Do you remember this park?" "No." "Do you want to try the cereal?" "No, thank you." She never pushed. But the distance between them felt fragile, like a glass bridge neither knew how to walk across. On the 4th day, they visited the San Diego Zoo. Rachel offered to skip it. Ben insisted. He wanted to go back, to the beginning. They entered through the same gate where Ethan had vanished. The sounds, smells, the layout, none of it triggered a specific memory. But something inside Ben tightened as they passed the reptile house. He stopped near the bronze tiger sculpture. "I think this is where you sat," Rachel said quietly. He closed his eyes. Suddenly, a wave of dizziness washed over him. He saw flashes, green fabric, a voice whispering, a sharp sting in his arm. Darkness. He gasped. Rachel grabbed his arm. "What is it?" He shook his head. "Nothing. Just, it's starting." That night, Ben sat alone on the porch, staring at the stars. Rachel joined him, holding 2 mugs of tea. "I don't want to replace anything," she said. "Not what you've lived, not who you became." He looked down. "I don't know how to be your son." "You already are," she said gently. "Just in your own way." The next day, Marcus Hale arrived with a box of old evidence files. Ben asked to see everything. He read every report, every interview, every lead that went nowhere. And then he asked Hale one question. "Why didn't you find me?" Hale looked down. "I failed you," he said. "I won't pretend otherwise. We all did." Ben nodded, then said, "I'm going to find the rest of what happened." Over the next 2 weeks, Ben met extended family. He reconnected with a cousin who used to build Legos with him. He watched home videos of himself as a child, birthday parties, Christmas mornings, swimming in the ocean. It was like watching someone else's life, a ghost version of himself. But then, one night, he watched a clip where 6-year-old Ethan turned to the camera and said, "One day I'm going to live with the elephants." Ben froze. Rachel paused the video. They looked at each other. Maybe, he had always known. Ben began therapy with a trauma specialist. He started learning English more formally, regaining language he had once known but lost. Some words returned quickly, others refused. He also kept drawing, the pages filled with animals, always animals. But now they walked between 2 worlds, one wild, one familiar. In one drawing, an elephant stood beside a boy holding a compass. The caption read, "Both of them know the way." He visited his old elementary school. The playground had changed. The slide was new, but the swing set remained. He sat on it for an hour, then quietly whispered, "I remember this." That night, Rachel found Ben packing a bag. "Where are you going?" He looked up. "I want to go back, just for a little while. There's something in me that needs both homes. Rachel swallowed hard. When will you come back? Ben smiled. I'm not leaving this time. I'm just stretching. 6 months later. The sanctuary in Nyaruba buzzed with quiet activity. The rains had come early that year, and the foliage was greener than ever. The elephants moved through the grasslands slowly, purposefully, their massive forms casting long shadows in the afternoon sun, and walking beside them, with quiet familiarity, was Ben, or Ethan, or both. He now answered to either, because he had accepted both. He had returned to Africa not to run from his past, but to reconcile it, to walk the same ground, speak the same language, and reclaim the parts of himself that still lived there. But this time, he wasn't a ghost of a boy trying to remember. He was a man who knew. He had stayed in touch with Rachel. They video called every Sunday. Sometimes they talked for an hour, other times just a few minutes. She had taken up drawing again, and often sent him sketches of new elephants she imagined. He replied with real ones. She was doing better now, lighter. She had started working again, teaching art part-time. The grief that once filled every room of her home had finally found a door to leave through. One day she mailed him a package. Inside, a new leather bracelet, hand-braided, with the initials E.B. on the underside. Ethan Ben. He wore it every day. Marcus Hale retired again, this time for good, but not before being honored at a ceremony for reopening the Ethan Miller case. His speech was short. Some stories stay cold for a reason, he said, but others wait patiently to be found. Lynn Sawyer's documentary aired worldwide, translated into multiple languages. It was nominated for an Emmy and sparked new legislation about long-term missing child investigations. Viewers across the globe wrote to Rachel and Ben. One letter read, "I lost my son. I stopped hoping. Your story brought it back." Ben began to write, not professionally, just in journals, pages filled with questions, memories, fragments of dreams. And eventually, he began speaking at youth centers about identity, trauma, and the strange beauty of rediscovery. He never told them exactly what happened, but he always said this: sometimes the world breaks you in half so you can learn how to walk as two people. Don't be afraid to meet the one you lost. 1 year after their reunion, Rachel visited Nyaruba. The moment she stepped off the plane, Ben hugged her, not cautiously, not out of obligation, but like a son welcoming his mother home. They spent 2 weeks together, walking, laughing, crying. She met the elephants. She met Daniel, Ayo, the ranger who had found him. She saw the rock where he had once sat alone under the stars. On the last night, she left a new mural on the wall of his cabin, a blue elephant facing the sunset with a compass in its tusks. Ben added something later, a small swing hanging from a tree. He never remembered everything, not clearly. Some parts remained shadows, but that no longer frightened him. Because he knew who he was now, and more importantly, he knew he had never truly been forgotten. And somewhere, far from the noise of the world under the wide African sky, a young man walked beside an elephant calf, a compass in his pocket, and a voice in his heart that whispered, "Blue elephants never forget."